Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I didn't inherit money. I inherited rituals. In our house, you learned early that the year had a shape, and that shape bent toward December. My mom kept a wall calendar with photos of national parks. She'd X out each day with a blue pen, and when the month flipped to Christmas, she'd draw a little pine tree in the box for the 24th, then a star on the 25th. She always said the holidays were how a family remembers itself. My dad, a union carpenter who worked sunup to sundown when jobs were hot and tinkered in the garage when they weren't, called it closing the loop. Everybody gets busy, everybody drifts, the loop brings you back. I grew up in a two-story split level on a street of lookalikes, same mailboxes, same hedges, same dads in the driveway with socket sets on Saturdays. We were 5 kids jammed into 3 bedrooms, me, the eldest, then my brothers, Pete and Joey, then the twins, Sam and Sarah, who arrived with the kind of chaos that makes neighbors bring casseroles and noise complaints. We didn't have much extra, but we had enough, and on the big days it felt like more than enough: extra chairs around a too small table, more hands passing dishes than space to put them down, dogs underfoot smart enough to sit by the toddler who always dropped rolls. By 8, I could mash potatoes without turning them to glue. By 10, I could carve meat without wasting the good stuff. By 12, Dad taught me the tricky trick: how to host. Hosting, he said, isn't just cooking. It's looking around the room and noticing which conversation needs a jump start, which kid needs a crumb wiped from a cheek, which aunt needs water when she's on her second glass of wine and getting a little too free with her opinions. Hosting is 1,000 small saves that nobody claps for, and that's how it should be. If you did it right, the night carried itself and everybody swore the magic just happened. I didn't know it at the time, but that lesson got welded into my bones as tight as any habit a boy picks up from a father he respects. I watched the way Dad nodded when Mom caught his eye from across the kitchen, how he'd step in to stir gravy or whisk eggs without making an announcement. I watched Mom plan 2 weeks ahead, then smile like it was effortless. I watched my sisters sneak frosting in my brother's roughhouse and the way the whole thing somehow held. I decided, consciously or not, that I wanted to be the man who held it. You don't think of those choices as choices when you're a kid. They feel like gravity. Years later, when I had my own mortgage and my own table and my own little humans who tracked in mud and giggles, December still meant something carved in stone. The loop would close. We would come back. I went to community college, then transferred to a state school when I realized calculus wasn't going to ruin my life after all. Summers, I framed houses and learned to read blueprints better than I read philosophy. After graduation, I slid into project coordination for a general contractor. Pay wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and the smell of cut lumber still felt like home. I'd be on sites at 6:15 a.m. with a thermos and a notebook, listening to the foreman bark orders and the air compressors cough awake. If you've never stood on an empty slab and imagined walls, you're missing out on a particular kind of optimism. I met Jessica on a spring Thursday, the way you meet half the important people in your life, through somebody else's plan you almost skipped. My buddy Dave convinced me to stop by a birthday thing after work. I showed up in steel-toe boots and a shirt with drywall dust on it. She was at the end of the bar in a sundress like the weather had decided to be kind just for her. She laughed with her whole face, hands talking along with the words, and when Dave waved me over for introductions, she flashed a smile big enough to make me forget I looked like I'd crawled out of a crawl space, which, to be fair, I had. We talked about nothing and everything. She worked retail then, later she'd bounced between boutique jobs and social media gigs, and she made fun of the way I said roof like a Midwesterner. She told me my hands looked like I built things, and I told her I did. When the bartender asked for last call, we were still talking like the rest of the bar was a radio turned down low. On our third date, I cooked for her, Mom's chicken with rosemary and lemon, the meal that never fails, and she said no one had ever made her dinner from scratch before. I don't know if that was true, but the way she said it made me want to be the man who did the small things others skipped. Our early years were the kind you look back on and wonder if you invented. Weeknight walks, Saturday thrift stores, lazy Sundays with coffee and crosswords we never finished. She was fun. She filled rooms. She'd put on music and dance barefoot in my kitchen, fingers drumming the counter while I chopped onions and pretended I could keep time. Her family was smaller than mine, just a brother and divorced parents who took holidays like obligations, but I figured, different doesn't mean worse. Maybe our house could be her house. Maybe my loop could become our loop. When we got married, courthouse first, backyard party later, my mom hugged her like she'd always been ours. Dad smiled that quiet, satisfied smile I'd seen the first time he let me use the miter saw by myself. My brothers tried to act cool and ended up crying at the toast. The twins plotted to throw us in the neighborhood pool and got intercepted by Grandma, who was 90 and still faster than both of them. It wasn't fancy, but it was us. We danced on grass that hadn't totally dried from last night's sprinkler and cut a cake leaning 3 degrees off-center. Jessica laughed and said crooked was more honest anyway. The first Christmas as a married couple, we hosted. Not because I insisted, honestly, I would have been fine easing her in, but because she said, "Let's do it. I want to see your mom's face when she walks in and doesn't have to lift a finger." She wore an apron she absolutely didn't need, poured wine like she'd auditioned for the role, and made everyone go around the table and say the best thing that happened to them that year. It was corny. It was perfect. Later, when the house finally went quiet and the dishwasher hummed like a lullaby, she curled into me on the couch and said, "Okay, I get it. This is big. It's loud. But it's big." I kissed her hair and thought, then let's build big. Our son came 2 years later, and our daughter 3 after that. I leveled up my lists. The tree got taller, the stockings multiplied, the toy assembly instructions got more ambitious and less grammatical. We bought a ranch with a basement that leaked the first spring and a yard that was mostly mud until I learned how to coax grass out of stubborn ground. I stuck a pegboard in the garage and hung every tool where it belonged, chalk-marked outlines so even a stranger could put them back. I kept anchor bolts and masonry screws in labeled bins, and when my brothers teased me for being a walking hardware aisle, I told them order is how you survive chaos. Somewhere between babies and budgets, between overtime and changing water heater anodes, small differences started to hum between us. Things you dismiss at first as personality quirks. Jessica liked to sleep late. I was up with the sun even on Sundays. She liked plans that changed last minute. I liked plans that existed long enough to be plans. She loved new restaurants, new friends, new routines every 3 months. I loved old, the places you go so often the waiter asks about your mom, the friends who know your worst stories and sit closer anyway, the routines that get so familiar they stop being routines and start being comfort. Most days, the differences were the good kind, the blend that makes a life fuller. Other days, they scratched. I'd talk about bringing everyone together for Christmas and she'd roll her eyes and say, "Again?" I'd ask her to please not bail an hour before guests arrived and she'd say she needed me time. I'd try to fold her family into ours and she'd say she felt swallowed whole by my people. I reminded her we could do less, we tried alternating years, we tried moving dates, we tried making it smaller. Somehow, whatever we did felt too big to her and too small to me. I clung to the parts that worked. She was electric at parties when she wanted to be, turning on a warmth that made shy people bloom. She could be kind. She could be funny. She could kneel on our kitchen floor and color with our daughter for an hour like the world wasn't on fire outside. I told myself the sighs and the eye rolls were seasonal, stress talking, nothing a nap and a long walk couldn't fix. I told myself marriage is 2 people taking turns being the strong one. I told myself we were fine. I'm not naive. I know people change. Somewhere along the way, Jessica started to feel the weight of my rituals like obligations instead of invitations. She joked to her brother that my family was a sitcom, same jokes, same plots, laugh track included. I'd smile like I got the joke too and then go fix the loose chair leg because jokes don't tighten screws. I didn't see the rest coming. Not then. Not when she told the neighbor she was over the whole big family thing. Not when she started staying late after girls' wine night. Not when she said she needed spark and I made the mistake of thinking spark was my job to manufacture, like a man can compete with a myth. But this isn't that part of the story yet. This is still the part where December meant lists and tables and a house with too many shoes by the door. Where I still believe the loop would hold because it always had. Where the man I promised to be, the host, the holder, the one who notices, still trusted that if you set the table and light the candles and carve the meat just right, Love shows up when it's supposed to. If you want to understand how it all broke, you have to understand why I cared so much about holding it together. Hosting wasn't a hobby to me. It was a language. It said, "You matter." We came back. We're us again. It said, "This is where you can put down whatever you carried in and pick up only what fits." It said, "I see you." I guess what I missed was that Jessica wanted to be seen somewhere else. But again, that's later. For now, picture a December morning, grocery list on the counter, my daughter drawing little stars in the margins, my son asking if we can do the guess the gift game again where I shake the box and pretend I'm a wizard. Picture the tree lights on even though it's daylight, because our house decided long ago that cozy beats efficient every time. Picture me in the garage, counting folding chairs and checking the table leaves, humming the same old carol off key. If you listen closely, you can hear my dad's voice in the back of my head telling me to check the oven pilot and my mom reminding me to put butter out early so it softens. You can also hear Jessica upstairs, door closed, getting ready, longer than usual. I tell myself she's curling her hair for photos. I tell myself a lot of things. By nightfall, that year, the house will be full and the story will break. But we're not there yet. We're still in the beginning, in the part where traditions feel like bedrock and love feels like a rhythm that can't skip. I wish I could stay here longer. Everyone does, once they know what's coming. The week before Christmas always felt like overtime in my life, not in a bad way, just in the way you hustle when something matters. I'd get up before the sun, hit the job site or the office, wrap up what I could before the holiday lull, and then turn straight into a different kind of work, planning the feast. Lists on the counter, sticky notes on the fridge, grocery bags stacked in the mudroom like sandbags against chaos. Jessica used to tease me about it. "You treat Christmas like a military operation," she'd say, rolling her eyes while I checked the pantry. I'd grin and fire back, "That's because amateurs make memories, professionals make traditions." It was corny. She used to laugh. This year, she didn't. Instead, she sighed when I asked if she could pick up wine on her way home. "Do we really need 12 bottles, Robert? What is this, a vineyard?" "It's family," I said. "They'll drink it." "Or you just like proving you can host better than anyone else?" That one stung more than I let show. I busied myself with the dishwasher instead of answering. By December 23rd, the house smelled like cinnamon and garlic. I had a ham brining in the fridge, rolls rising in bowls under towels, pies cooling by the window. My daughter sat at the table stringing popcorn garlands, my son running toy trucks between chair legs. If you'd snapped a photo, you'd swear it was one of those holiday ads where everyone looks a little too happy. But behind the photo, Jessica was scrolling on her phone, not helping, not humming along with the carols. When I asked if she'd grab more butter, she looked up like I'd interrupted something important. "I'll go tomorrow," she said flatly. Christmas Eve came. The doorbell started ringing at 4. First my parents, cheeks red from the cold, arms loaded with gifts. Then my sister and her husband, balancing a toddler in a crock-pot. Then cousins, brothers, neighbors who always seemed to show up when they smelled food cooking. The living room filled fast, coats piled on a guest bed, laughter bouncing off walls, the kind of noise that makes a house feel alive. That's when it hit me, Jessica wasn't smiling. She went through the motions, poured drinks, kissed cheeks, handed out napkins. But her eyes were elsewhere, flicking down to her phone every chance she got. I chalked it up to stress, nerves, maybe just not being in the mood. We all have off days, right? Dinner started the way it always did, Dad carving the ham, Mom leading a clumsy prayer, kids sneaking olives off trays. I looked around the table and felt that old pride, I'd pulled it off again. The house was warm, the food was plenty, the loop had closed. And then Jessica's phone buzzed. I shouldn't have looked. But it lit up right beside my plate. The screen flashed a preview I'll never forget. "I want this to be over. Can't wait to see you." The words hit like a nail gun to the chest. My fork froze mid-air. Around me, the conversation carried on, my sister laughing, my dad telling a story about a job site, my kids arguing over who got more rolls. Normal. Completely normal. Except I couldn't breathe. I told myself I misread it. A friend venting? A wrong number? But when Jessica saw me staring, her hand shot out, flipping the phone face down. Her cheeks flushed, not with a glow of wine or laughter, but with guilt. "Everything okay?" my mom asked, sensing the air shift. "Yeah," Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. "Just work." Work. On Christmas Eve. During dinner. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But 20 years of reading blueprints teaches you to see the flaws behind the paint. The foundation had cracked, I just hadn't wanted to notice. After dinner, while the kids unwrapped board games and the adults nursed coffee, I slipped into the hallway. My heart was pounding like I'd just sprinted. I scrolled back through every late night, every wine with friends, every sigh when I mentioned family. The puzzle pieces clicked together, and the picture they made wasn't one I wanted to hang on the wall. I wasn't the only one who noticed something was wrong. My sister caught me in the hall. "Rob? You okay?" she whispered. I forced a smile. "Yeah. Just tired." Her eyes narrowed. She'd grown up with me. She knew better. The night ended messy. Too much noise, too many feelings I couldn't name. People left with hugs and leftovers, promising to call tomorrow. The house got quiet again, except for the hum of the fridge and my own pulse in my ears. Jessica stood at the sink, rinsing plates, humming like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But the kids were upstairs, and the walls were thin, and some fights shouldn't be their lullabies. So I waited. But inside me, something had already shifted. I didn't know it yet, but that Christmas dinner would be the last time we all sat at that table as a family. The morning after Christmas Eve should have been slow. Coffee steaming, kids tearing into gifts, me half asleep on the couch while ribbons piled high like snowdrifts. That's what it should have been. Instead, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. The phone screen from last night burned behind my eyes. "I want this to be over. Can't wait to see you." I didn't imagine it. I didn't misread it. It was real. Jessica moved around the kitchen like nothing was wrong. She poured juice for the kids, smiled for photos, joked about how Santa forgot batteries. She was good at the act, too good. If I hadn't seen the text, I might have believed her. But once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. By noon, the house was full again. Family tradition, Christmas Day dinner at ours, everyone bringing leftovers and new dishes, stories spilling over from last night. I'd always loved it, the noise, the smell of cinnamon rolls reheated, the way the living room floor disappeared under toys and coats. But this time, the noise felt like static. I kept watching Jessica. Every time her phone buzzed, her eyes darted, her lips twitched into half-smiles that weren't for me. I couldn't stop myself. When she left her phone on the counter to grab something from the oven, I picked it up. My hands were shaking like I'd scrubbed them raw. The message thread was short, blunt, undeniable. "Last night was torture. I'll sneak out soon. Can't wait to be in your arms." The name at the top wasn't even disguised, Matt. The bartender from down the street. I knew him. He poured drinks at O'Malley's, where we'd grabbed wings once or twice. The kind of guy who called everyone buddy and flirted with anything that moved. I froze with the phone in my hand. And then Jessica's voice cut through the noise. "What are you doing?" The whole room went quiet. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. My mom's eyes flicked from me to Jessica. My sister leaned forward like she already knew. I held up the phone. "Want to explain this?" Jessica's face drained of color. Then came the defense. "You had no right to go through my phone. You're paranoid. You've been smothering me with this family circus." Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut the air. My dad set down his fork slowly, like he was laying down a tool. "Jessica," he said, calm but firm. "Answer the question." She folded her arms. "So what if I talk to someone else? I'm suffocating here. All these traditions, all this hosting. It's not a life, Robert. It's a prison." Gasps around the table. My daughter stared at her plate. My son shifted uncomfortably. My mom covered her mouth with her hand, like she could hold the words in. I said nothing at first. I couldn't. My throat locked up. Finally, I managed. A prison? I worked my whole life to give us this. The house, the dinners, the family. And you, I shook the phone. You throw it away for a guy who pours shots? Jessica's brother, who had shown up with a six-pack and a smirk, jumped in. Come on, Rob. Don't act like you're perfect. Jess just wanted something different. Maybe she deserves it. That did it. My sister slammed her hand on the table. Different? She's destroying her family, and you're defending her? Voices collided. My mom crying, my dad cursing under his breath, cousins pulling kids out of the room. The Christmas dinner that was supposed to be our anchor turned into a storm. Jessica shouted over the chaos, I don't regret it. At least he makes me feel alive. Alive. That word again. Always that word. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who used to dance barefoot in my kitchen, who used to say crooked cakes were more honest, who once called my family big with a smile. Now she was spitting the same word that patients whispered in hospital beds when they fought to breathe. Alive. And just like that, something inside me snapped. I stood up, took off the apron I'd been wearing, and set it on the chair. Then go feel alive somewhere else, I said quietly. Because this family isn't your stage anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting. Jessica grabbed her coat, muttering about being trapped, about how no one understood her. Her brother followed her out, still shaking his head. The door slammed, and the sound echoed through the house like a nail sealing a coffin. I turned back to the table. My parents, my sister, my kids, they all looked at me, waiting. I forced a smile that didn't fit my face. Who wants pie? I said, my voice breaking. No one answered. That was the night the loop broke. The night Jessica walked out, the house didn't just feel empty. It felt hollow. The walls still stood, the lights still glowed, but something in the foundation had shifted. You don't unhear words like prison or at least he makes me feel alive. They echo in the drywall, in the spaces between floorboards, in the silence after the kids go to bed. I cleaned up the dishes from that shattered Christmas dinner by myself. My mom tried to help, but I waved her off. My dad lingered in the doorway, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. I know, I answered, though it felt like a lie. When the last plate was stacked and the floor swept, I went upstairs. My daughter was curled under her blanket, thumb in her mouth, something she hadn't done in years. My son sat on his bed, clutching a Lego figure like it was a talisman. Is Mom coming back? He asked, his voice small. I sat beside him, pulled him into my arms. Not tonight, I said. But you've got me. Always. For weeks after, the house was too quiet. No more buzzing phone on the counter. No more Jessica humming while she folded laundry. Just the sound of kids breathing, of the furnace cycling on, of me trying to figure out how to cook for 3 instead of 5. The divorce papers came quick. No drawn-out battles, no fight over custody. Jessica didn't want the responsibility. She wanted her freedom, and freedom meant signing her name on dotted lines and walking away. I signed too, hands steady even as my chest ached. My family became my scaffolding. Mom dropped off casseroles, Dad fixed leaky pipes, my sister babysat when I worked late. They didn't just help, they reminded me I wasn't broken beyond repair. I leaned into work. A buddy of mine who ran a construction firm pulled me in as a consultant. It wasn't glamorous, long days, long nights, but it was steady. And steady was what I needed. There was a strange peace in walking onto a site, seeing raw beams and drywall dust, and knowing you could build something from nothing. The kids adjusted, in their own way. My daughter drew family pictures with 3 people instead of 4. My son asked if we could still do Christmas at our house next year. Of course, I told him. The loop still closes. We're still us. But rebuilding wasn't just about keeping old rituals. It was about finding new ones. Friday night pizzas in pajamas. Saturday morning hikes. Sunday breakfasts where we made pancakes too thick to cook through. Little things that stitched us together. 2 years passed. The pain dulled into a scar. Jessica drifted further into her own mess. I heard whispers from neighbors, saw her brother less and less. But she wasn't my problem anymore. Then one afternoon at a client meeting, I met Claire. She worked for an architecture firm we partnered with, sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of woman who noticed details without making a show of it. We started with blueprints and deadlines, then lunches, then coffee that turned into dinners. She didn't roll her eyes at family gatherings. She asked to meet my parents. She brought board games for the kids. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't drama. It was something better, steady, honest, real. The next Christmas, Claire sat at our table, passing mashed potatoes, laughing at my dad's old stories like they were new. My son leaned against her shoulder. My daughter held her hand. For the first time since the night everything cracked, I looked around the room and thought, this is what alive feels like. Alive wasn't bar lights and secrets. Alive was family, rebuilt and stronger. I used to think traditions were fragile, that if one person walked away, the whole thing collapsed. But I was wrong. Traditions don't break, they bend. They reshape. They survive in whoever is willing to carry them forward. And I carried them. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I finally understood what my dad meant when he said, closing the loop. The loop wasn't about everyone showing up perfectly. It was about showing up at all. And this time, the people around the table wanted to be there. That was enough. More than enough. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.